Do I also
Okay, good.
have sharing capabilities? I didn't look yet.
You sure do.
Okay, okay, I didn't look. Yeah, okay. Okay, so before I start, a little bit about myself. Deborah, KC2 GPV. I've had my ham license since 2000. Hard to believe I've had my license now 22 years. Um, uh, my day job, I'm currently working from home. I've been working from home since March of 2020 when this madness started. But I worked for an oil trading company, been there 12 years. In addition to doing the marathon, I am also an American Red Cross volunteer. I've been with them 21 years. And I don't know, I started this journey as a ham radio volunteer back when I was dating my ex-husband. I had no idea what ham radio was. He got me involved in it, and I guess you could say I got addicted. I got to know Steve Mendelson very well. He became a very close friend. And from there, the next thing I knew, I was sort of being handed the keys to the kingdom, I guess you want to say. And all because I thought I was helping. Unbeknownst to myself, I was being recruited and roped in. So here I am 22 years later with my license and running things, the largest event in the country, in the world. But I have to say, I've made an incredible family here that, you know, I tell people all the time, this is not just a hobby. It's become a family, and I couldn't be more grateful. But that being said, the marathon is one of the greatest events that we could possibly do a public service for. We have an opportunity that is given to us every year to provide a service to the city of New York. And it's definitely one that I value very much because of what it is that we're able to give back to the runners, to the event organizers, to the city, and the other emergency personnel that put their time and effort in it, to know that we're able to give something back to them at the same time and help them out. It means a lot. So that's just a little bit about myself. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is that okay?
That'd be great.
Okay, so what I'll do, guys, is I figured what I'd do. We all know that we're stuck in this Zoom era, so to speak. So, and I spoke to Richie last night. I'm not a fan of this because I feel like it would have more an impact if I was with you, in front of you. But under the circumstances, and also I'm also still getting over, I wound up not having COVID, thank God, but I wound up with an upper respiratory infection. So I'm still sort of getting over it. So I really don't want to be in this position to present to you this way. But so what I'll do is I'm going to put the presentation up. I'll talk to you, and off and on, I'll pause the presentation a little bit so that if anybody wants to ask me some questions, that gives everybody that opportunity, and you guys can see my face again, because staring at a screen, we all know, is, you know, it can be annoying. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up. Okay, is everybody able to see the presentation?
Looks good.
Just want to make sure before I start. I want to be able to see you guys too. So.
And we also do see your face too, a little picture in picture.
Okay, good. Okay. I never know what it looks like on the opposite end when I'm presenting. So.
Right, that is true.
Okay. All right. So I did tailor this down a little bit. I've been doing my presentations for the last year or so. When I was recruiting, after speaking with Harry and George and Richie, I know that you guys are looking for something a little bit more than me just giving my normal spiel of recruiting. So I tailored the presentation a little differently. Some of you, I'm noticing who's on here. Some of you have probably seen slides that you won't see tonight, because I decided not to turn this into a recruiting presentation, but more of, what is being utilized in the marathon. Um, Many of you probably have not done the marathon ever, or some of you haven't done it in several years. And since I've taken over, I've made a number of adjustments to the event, as you'll see in the presentation. So I have adjusted it a little bit to what people normally see me present. So let's go here. There we go. Okay, so I'm in charge of three of the largest events in New York City. I've been tasked with doing the New York City Half Marathon, the New York City Triathlon, and the New York City Marathon. All of those three events are the events that Steve Mendelson was in charge of. We're hoping that this goes the same this year, that the events will take place. The dates for the upcoming events this year are March. So just to step back a half a sec. So the events are always the same month every year. The half marathon's always in March. The triathlon's always in July, the hottest month of the year, and the marathon is always in November. So this year the half is in March 20th. The triathlon is July 24th, and the marathon is November 6th. Something interesting to keep in mind with the New York City Triathlon is that in recent years, I want to say in the last 7 years, the date for the New York City Triathlon has fluctuated a lot. And the reason for that is that they place the date of that event based on the ebb and flow of the Henry Hudson River. So based on the tide, based on that, that determines when they will hold the event. And most recently in last year, they changed the actual start and extraction points. They always used to swim uptown and they now swim downtown. So the triathlon date is all over the map. They used to do it in the beginning of July, and now this year they're doing it July 24th. So I'm sure this is going to look very familiar to all of you. We know what our mission statement is as a ham radio operator. It seems to be our mission statement for any event that we do, whether it's the marathon, or whether it's a local event, whether it's, anything that we are put to task as a ham radio operator, our mission statement is the same. We are out there to provide communications to whomever is requesting our presence. For the New York City Marathon, though, we are a force multiplier. We are out there in numbers. And when I say we are out there in numbers, we are really out there in numbers. It's one of the largest events that requires as many. When I go to compare, to give you a comparison, and the New York City Half and the New York City Tri, those warrant me to recruit probably no more than 35 to 40 volunteers. Back when Steve Mendelson was doing this event, his numbers were as large as 500 volunteers. Currently, I'm doing about 300 volunteers for this event. So the numbers had dropped a little bit when Steve had passed away. And then once we kind of got back in the swing of things, because keep in mind, Superstorm Sandy pretty much killed the marathon that year. So there was a whole year break between those events, just like we just had a huge break of a year between COVID. So the numbers did drop a little bit, but then we're back up and the numbers are strong. So this event is so large, and it's not just because we're covering the course. That's the thing. We are such a large event and requires so many ham radio operators because of where we have our operators placed, where we are providing the support. And so we are out there in high numbers, and we are all over the place. We are at the course. We are at the start. We are at the finish. We are in the little nooks and crannies of the event where people don't realize that we are. And our whole mission, our whole point is to provide the situational awareness that is expected of us, that is requested of us, that is needed. And a lot of times too, we are doing things that they don't even realize that we're doing. And I will get to some of that in a minute, because you're probably wondering what I'm referring to. And you'll be interested and you'll understand what I'm going to refer to later on. But our mission statement is to provide the support necessary to make it a successful event. Because at the end of the day, and I get this a lot, and believe it or not, it is something that comes up all the time, but I get the same question, but I always give the same answer. And even though I don't like to sound repetitive, at the end of the day, if you didn't do anything, it's a good event, because nobody died, nobody got hurt. There wasn't something that was tragic. There wasn't anything that it required all of the agencies to go into panic mode. We're there, and we stood by, and we did something, and we were there when they needed us. And at the end of the day, if that is what happened, it was a good event, because we didn't have something catastrophic or anything that happened. Do people like standing around doing nothing? Of course not. I don't like standing around doing nothing. But as long as we were there, we were a presence, we were there for what was needed, we were able and willing and ready and just ready to go at a moment's notice, that means it was a good day, because we were there. So as far as assignments go and what it is that we do for this particular event, we actually do way more than the half marathon and the triathlon. But let me get into the specifics here. So the ham radio operators, all of the volunteers that come out for this event, I told you there's about 300 volunteers. As far as assignment goes, the assignments are your typical, along the course, mile point assignments. And they used to just be mile point assignments, and that was it. And back in the day, there was a mile captain, and then there was the mile operators under him. In the past decade and a half, 2 decades, I want to say that we've now been placed at medical aid stations. There are other key safety positions that we've been placed at. One of the things that was just most recently implemented, and I'm going to probably say it's 2018, we are now placed at critical intersections along the course, and I'll get into that in a minute. And then there are other event transition areas where we are placed. On top of that, we are in event vehicles. So we are in the start vehicles. We are in a precursor vehicle that is for our purpose only. And then we are also in the sweep vehicles that follow down the course at the end of the event. On top of that, we are also in the RCC, the Race Command Center. We've always been in the RCC prior to our integration in 2017. When I say prior, what was happening was we had 4 people that were in that tent just for the sole purpose of dropouts. Since 2017, and let me just back up a second. So prior to 2017, we used to be our command for us, our ham command used to be segregated, and we would be in a trailer that would be on the opposite side of the finish line. So for any of you that are or are not familiar with the setup, the finish line is at Tavern on the Green inside Central Park on West Drive. And the Race Command Center is on one side of West Drive, and we would be up on the other side of it. And for the longest time, for as long as I've been doing the event, up until 2017, we were in this trailer that was just strictly ours. And then in 2017, we were moved. And you're probably wondering why. Well, I'll tell you why. In 2016, which was the first year that I actually fully took over the event completely on my own, I had been doing the event as the organizer, but sort of under the guidance of somebody else for 2013, no, 2014 and 15. Um, we we were up on the bridle path in the command trailer, and I remember distinctly them. We had a New York Roadrunner representative come running, and I mean running across the field, across the finish line, which was West Drive. It was post finish. Come barging into the trailer and said, "Oh my God, what do we do?" And we just sort of looked at him and went, "Oh, okay, calm down. What's wrong?" And the gentleman said, "We just lost all communication. We now know we have no way to communicate with anybody on the course." And what we later found out within minutes was that essentially the commercial repeater that was up on top of the Chrysler building had pretty much taken a crap. And so now every commercial radio that they were relying on no longer worked. And of course, what was it that we were really there for? Exactly what we were meant to do. And so from that incident in 2016, because we were literally not within arm's reach of New York Roadrunners in the RCC, we were moved. And so now, since 2017, our command tent literally sits directly next to the RCC tent. So literally they can just simply walk out their tent door and here's our tent door and we're right there. So since 2017, not only do we have a few people that still sit in the RCC, we are now right there, pretty much up their nose, so to speak, and we are within their reach should something happen like that again. It has not happened. Yes, that's correct. It has not happened. That's a great thing. At the same time, we don't want a repeat of what happened in 2016 either. We also don't want them having to run halfway across Central Park to find us, because that right there showed the catastrophic thing that could happen, with them not being able to communicate with anybody on the course. And then, of course, the other place that we have some representatives is at One Police Plaza. And I don't think too many people know that. But we have representation there. The great thing about that is that we are situated at 1PP, literally in the same room as every other single agency that participates in this event. So you've got all of your city agencies, you've got everything from the FBI to DOT to the TLC, everything. And, the great thing about being in that location is because, if something should happen, or let's say it's before the race, and it's happened before, where there's an issue at a specific mile marker and there's a huge gaping hole in the road, we communicate back and forth from the course. We give that information over to 1PP. Our ham radio operators turn that information over to the DOT or whoever, and they literally get right on it, and we fix that problem before the event starts. So there are all of these different aspects of assignments that I have to fulfill in order to get this event to work. And it seems like a lot. It's not. It is, but it isn't at the same time. And having the amount of volunteers that come out for this event makes that difference. So I like this page because this gets asked of me a lot. Who are we? So this event is organization neutral. Okay, what does that mean? What that means is obviously, all the local events that we cover. Okay, Aries has their events, Limark has their events. Those are local events, and that's because Aries is recruiting their Aries members for an event, or Limark has an event that they're covering and they're recruiting Limark members. This event is organization neutral. You don't have to be an Aries member. You don't have to be a Limark member. You don't have to be an ARRL member. You don't have to be anybody. If you are a ham radio operator, we want you. We want you to come out. You're not tied to anything. We don't expect you to be tied to anything. Um, the great thing that I'm very proud of that I will say is, as you're seeing on the screen, when I started, it was primarily the tri-state area, with several people from Massachusetts, from Connecticut, from Florida. And then as the years have gone on since I've taken over, we literally are the the states that I have people coming from is growing exponentially. And I'm very proud to say that I'm happy to see that people are coming the distance to come. I have people that are already working the event that do the recruiting, and they're pulling people in, because of the internet presence that I've put out there in the last several years. People have found out about me and other things by way of Facebook and stuff like that. So in 2021, the first year, I had people come from DC, Delaware, Illinois, Kansas, North Carolina, Utah, and Wisconsin. I mean, who would have thought I'd have people coming from Utah and Wisconsin? So it's been pretty incredible. So we have people from as far away as these states that come into New York to do these events. In 2019, we had 280 people that volunteered for this. In that year, I had 57 more than 18, and of that, we had 53 new people. We had the break in 2020 because of COVID, obviously. And in 2021, this past year, we had upwards of 295. And so what was a very interesting, and I took a turn here when I recruited in last year. I was curious because we had the year off. So for anybody that doesn't volunteer for this event, what you should know is when I recruit, I do it by email and I use a Google Docs link. And it's a series of questions. The reason I do it that way is because New York Roadrunners requires registration on their website, but they don't ask questions that I need. So when you go to Roadrunners to register, because you have to have your credential, and that's the only way it gets generated, they don't ask you your call sign. I don't know what your capabilities are. I don't know if you can do DMR, analog. I don't know any of that information. So when I send out my information, I ask you to fill out a link. This year, I took it a little extra step further because of the break and the time off with COVID. I was curious who was coming back. I was curious, did somebody come back that hasn't been here in years? And it was very interesting that I had 6 people returning that hadn't done the event since 2012. And I had about 22 people that had taken the break between 13 and 18. So that was nice to see that I had people that were coming back. We had 63 new people with a total between 2 years. So 2019 and 2021, 116 new hands that have never done this before have now come out for this event. And that is very refreshing. And without, I'm sure I'm gonna hear it because I'm probably the youngest person in the room. But we all know that this is a dying hobby. And we all know that as ham radio operators, we are an older generation. And to see 116 new hams to come out for this, to come out for an event that isn't easy to do. I mean, I've had people that have come out for the event and have told me, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I don't know what I'm doing. How do I do this? And I say the answer to that is I say, you're not being placed by yourself. You're not out there alone. You're with somebody. You're with another fellow ham radio operator. They will guide you. They will teach you. They will help you. They will let you learn all the knowledge that they have had all these years. So it's nice. It's refreshing to see that many new people that are coming out to this hobby. In fact, what I don't have up here is of the 116 new people in the last couple of years, at least 25 of them are brand new people that literally just got their ticket. They've never done an event. This is their first event. They've never done a local event. So that alone is refreshing to know that this may not be a dying hobby because there are people that are getting the word out there about ham radio. So the biggest thing that was the purpose for tonight is to, as Harry and George and Richie were interested, is what exactly is the purpose of ham radio for an event of this size? So I want to start by saying, first off, is that way back in the day, the event was just analog radio. That was it. Analog radio, this is what we did. End of story. When I took over in 2015, and then really fully in 16, but when I took over in 2015, and after Steve Mendelson had passed away, I tried to analyze what was happening. I was trying to figure out, well, why aren't people coming back? Or, and some people left for valid reasons. Some people left, they moved. A few other people, they had left because they had decided that, well, Steve passed away, I was doing this because of Steve. So I said, and I didn't take any offense, absolutely none. But I was trying to figure out why though. And the thing is that it was just analog. And I thought, well, there's so much new technology that is coming. There's so much new aspects of ham radio that we're not tapping into. So we are doing analog. In 2016, I implemented DMR. We also use APRS, Arden. We're also using a mesh network. So we're doing all of this. So let me go back. So for this event, we do logistics and we do medical. That's the primary concern. We're doing logistics for this event. We're coordinating information that is being passed along primarily on the course, because obviously, once the start is done, then that little piece goes away. So essentially we do the start, the course, the finish. When the start is done, we're done with that. The finish is waiting. That's waiting in the wings. You have the course. We're doing the course, we're doing medical, and we're doing all of that 90% of the time. In addition to doing all of that, we were, I want to make sure I word this rightly, because we were primarily doing analog. Now, I'm going to probably put myself in a position here because, of course, I said these words years ago and I made a promise, and I don't like to go back on my promises. But when I implemented DMR, I told everybody, I said, it's not required. It's not required that you have a DMR radio. I will never make it mandatory. I still won't, but I'm not going to lie. So I told people I'm not going to make it mandatory. I want to implement it. I want to see how it works. I had my reasons for it also, but I will now tell you, we started out with DMR, and I want to say the first year to 2 years, I had about 35% people utilizing DMR. Well, last year's New York City Triathlon, we were 100% on DMR. Was that because I pushed it? No. It happened to be because everybody that registered had a DMR radio. So we were able to operate on DMR alone. What was my purpose? My purpose for DMR, I didn't implement it, first of all. I did not implement DMR at the New York City Marathon. Why? I was terrified. Why would I implement something that new into a massive event where there was an opportunity for something to go wrong? So what I did was, my purpose for it was because I had mentioned earlier that I felt I wanted to entice people to continue to participate. So if I'm going to entice them, the best way to do that is let's implement something that's coming out that's new, that people are going to want an interest in. So that was one reason for why I chose to implement DMR. The other problem that I was using it for, and I say problem, the problem lied within the New York City Triathlon. The New York City Triathlon is an interesting event for those of you that have not done that event before. And it's an interesting event to the point where it's 3 different types of courses. It's not just a run event. You've got a swim, a bike, and a run. And the problem within that event is on the bike course. So up on the bike course, near the Mosholu Parkway, in that area, um, there is a geographical topographical problem where the topography, there's way too many trees. The geography portion of it where the road, there's a whole area where the road has a massive dip in it. And we would always wind up with one motorcycle rider. And that's the other thing to make mention of is um, one of the interesting things for this event is, and people laugh at me all the time, but I say it's a problem, is it's a very rare combination to find a ham radio operator that also owns a motorcycle. So I'm going to put that out there right now. I told you this wasn't a recruiting presentation, but anybody that knows anybody that owns a motorcycle and has a ham license, please send them my way, because it is a very difficult combination to find. But it's very crucial at the same time, because the New York City Triathlon requires us to provide ham radio operators that have that capability. And for us to provide that service can be challenging. I had several ham radio operators that owned motorcycles, but they're up there in age and they choose not to participate anymore. So trying to find people that own motorcycles, if I'm not kind of in that loop, is difficult. But getting back to the problem, we had one section. So on the bike course, it's a 4-zone area. So I have 4 moto, I call them 4 moto hams. And in that one section, we lost contact with our operator on the analog network, and we had very difficult time making communications with him. We would sometimes have to tell a different zone moto ham, can you ride up to the other guy and find out, A, is he okay? 2, we can't hear him. So I said, this would be a perfect opportunity. Let's go ahead and implement DMR at the Tri. It's a small event where, we'll still use the analog, but we're just going to implement it just in that spot. So that particular year, I only needed 4 people to operate on DMR. And we made it very simple. They came to the tent that morning of, we handed them the DMR radios. We gave it to them. We did not tell them they needed them. We told them, we want to try this. So come get the radios. They're going to be pre-programmed. Let's give this a try. They had their own analog. It was used as a backup. When I tell you that the DMR worked flawlessly, I mean flawlessly. Everything worked exactly as it should. We never lost contact with any operator on the motorcycle course. I could not have been happier. So once I tested that out and saw how that worked, I then took the next step and I implemented the DMR into the New York City Marathon that year. And that was the first time that I had sent out my email and I said, this is not mandatory. We're not expecting you to go run out and go buy a DMR. Listen, we all know this hobby. Every one of you here with me tonight, you all know that this is a very expensive hobby. You can either buy a $99 radio or you can buy upwards of $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of equipment. So for me to put that on somebody and say, well, you have to go out and buy a radio, that's not my place. I'm not going to say that. But if you have it or you want to, that's okay. That's up to you. So the first year DMR, I put it out there. I said, this is how this is going to go. If you would like to, we're going to implement this. To my surprise, I had about 15 to 20% of the people that jumped at the chance. Some already had a DMR radio, and some of them, because as soon as the registration went out and they saw it in my registration question, they jumped online and bought one. I joke all the time with everybody, and the funny thing is in the very beginning, everybody wanted to know, oh, can you recommend something? And so we were all pretty much, at the time, we were all getting the same radio. So I joke all the time, I would love to be able to call. I might even do this one day. I would love to be able to call Retibus and find out how much money they made off of me, because I kept telling everybody, oh, go get this model. And I think pretty much almost everybody that is part of my group, they all have a Retibus. So I'm wondering how much money they made off of me. So it was not a requirement. It's still not a requirement, but we are using DMR because it is working so well for what it is that we are trying to accomplish. And we all know, there's a lot of RF interference out there. Buildings are always a problem. Trees are always an issue. Things don't always work the way we want them to. So the reason DMR was implemented was for that reason. And I tested it out and I tried it. And to my surprise, it worked great. And now, so at the same time, now I've piqued an interest and people are like, wow, okay. So that was the DMR. So put that to the side. So what else are we using? I also went ahead and I implemented APRS. APRS has come in extremely handy. What we were originally doing was we were just doing APRS in the sweep vehicles. A sweep vehicle is a vehicle, and I know you all know this, a sweep vehicle is a vehicle that trails behind at the end of the race and picks up any of the runners or the athletes that are tired, they can't go on, whatever the case is. They were just strictly in the sweep vehicles. They are now also in the sweep vehicles. They are in the lead athlete vehicles. So they're actually, in addition to the lead athlete, so I'll break that down for you. We have APRS in the women's lead, the women's press, the men's lead, the men's press, as we call it, the sweep van. The sweep van happens to be the captain's vehicle. So just like we have mile operators and mile captains, there are the sweep operators. So we have anywhere from 4 to 5 sweep buses, and those 4 to 5 people report back to the sweep captain, who's a ham. So we've got 4 vehicles that are going down the course, 4 lead, and then we have the sweep van. In addition to that, in the most recent 2 years, 19 and 21, what we are also doing is we're telling people, if you've got the app on your phone, turn the app on. Go ahead and turn the app on, because now we're able to track other items out there on the course for the event, especially the people that are shadowing. So myself, I shadow the race director, and there's a few other people that are shadowing a few other key personnel. They're turning it on their phones. And now if we can't, for some reason, either can't get the race director on the telephone, or for some reason, let's just say I'm the one that's shadowing the race director and I've got to take a personal break because I've got to use the bathroom. And I step away from my radio, as we all know, that's the protocol. Somebody can just go right to the map and look at the computer and go, oh, okay, the race director, he's standing over by the side at Tavern on the Green. He's actually not at the finish line, but okay, we know where he is. So we're utilizing that as a piece of information. So we've got analog, DMR, we've got APRS. What I implemented along with Mike, we started using something called Slack. Slack is a platform that allows for messaging. Now, this is outside of ham, but there's a reason for it. So we all know the old adage that a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, the reason for Slack, and this is the only reason that we use it, the reason for Slack is because there have been numerous times in the last couple of years where, one of the volunteers, one of the hams will try to describe something to us that's at their location. They'll try to say, I'm standing here on the corner of, and the tent that's here, that the medical tent that they put up, it's here, but it's in this way. And I don't know how to describe it. So now what we do is we tell them, okay, we want you to take a picture of what it is you're trying to describe us. Take a picture of it and now put it into Slack. because what we do is we have all the mile captains. All the mile captains are the ones that, obviously we're not doing this with the regular operators. All of the mile captains are creating a Slack account. Everything is pooled into this one thing. And then that whole pool of mile captains can communicate back and forth very easily. And the other mile captains also can see the messages, and they're communicating back to our ham tent. And we can also at the same time, they're now saying, and we're not, and that's the other thing, by using Slack, we're not telling you to use your own cell phone number to text this person's cell phone number, which you may or may not have in your phone already. Like, Glenn, I'm going to use it. Glenn, I see you on here, so I'm going to use you as an example. So let's say Glenn knows that he's got to message me, but he realizes, oh shit, I don't have her number. Like, but he's already set up on Slack. He did his homework. He did what he was supposed to do the day before the event, and he made his account and he set it all up. And now he's got this problem. Well, so now that he's got Slack and he doesn't have to dig for my phone number, he takes the picture, he puts it into Slack, it pops up, we see it. And now if we're trying to explain it to Roadrunners, and Roadrunners is like, what? Well, we can just go, well, hey, this is the picture. This is what we're trying to tell you. This is what our guy is saying. Here's the problem. And they'll go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, no, we got it, done, we'll fix it. So we implemented that just as an extra tool for us to be able to utilize if there was such a problem that presented itself that sometimes the description just doesn't do it. You're trying to say to us, well, this shouldn't be here, and this guy did this, and well, that doesn't help us. If you can't convey that for us, we can't help you. So we discovered Slack. We discovered it was a platform that we thought might work. It turns out that it works quite well. We use it for a few other things internally. It works out really well for that as well. And it's just another tool in our toolbox that we're using. What the other thing is, oh yeah, and that's another thing that I wanted to mention. So because of Slack, okay, some of the users that are using Slack, okay, they're actually using Wi-Fi hotspots. So for the people that are out on the course, some of them are using Wi-Fi hotspots that are then connected to the Arden mesh, okay, and then they're connecting via an internet gateway. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on here, but at the end of the day, it's getting its job done, and we're doing what it is that we need to do to make it work. Now, I want to go and just jump to the last two things here. So the other things that we started to implement, and we started really to implement them back in like 17, 18, probably 17, was Arden, and then we're using Mesh. And I know that they're somewhat similar, but the way I'm going to describe this here, we're using it for two purposes. So the Arden network, okay, we're using the Arden network within the tent. We're doing a lot of, so as you recall, I mentioned earlier about the mess that got created in 2016 with the Chrysler building. That same year, ironically, we also had a problem with Wi-Fi and internet. The trailer that was next to us that was providing that service to us also had a problem, and we lost our capability to utilize Wi-Fi, which is a big problem because we were using computers, we were doing logging, we were tracking stuff, and for us to lose our Wi-Fi, that was an issue. So we now provide our own Wi-Fi. We now provide all of that. We don't rely on New York Roadrunners. We don't rely on one of the television networks because back in 2016 and 15, we were pulling that Wi-Fi. We were pulling it from a trailer that was at the finish line that was providing the internet, and we don't want to rely on that anymore. We want to be able to stand alone on our own, and we don't want our systems to fail, so to speak. So we have Arden that we use. And then in addition to that, we are using a mesh network. So what we started doing a couple of years ago, we started doing, we would send a video feed mesh, okay? We were doing it from the course. last year, for the first time in 2021, what we did was not only were we feeding the mesh from the course back to the tent, we were now also sending it to our 2 ham radio operators that were sitting in one police plaza. So they were also being able to see that feed at 1 PP, and everybody at 1 police plaza was able to see what was going on that we were giving. In addition to, we have somebody that sits in the RCC tent, and our one of my ham radio operators, those, I'm sure you all know him, one of my ham radio operators, who is Rob Yenis, he's one of my volunteers that sits in the RCC. And one of the things that he does, in addition to giving all of the runner information to the person in the RCC, he keeps his laptop up, and they are able to see our mesh feed, and they can see what we're seeing, and it's become quite beneficial, and we are providing that as well. So all of this that you're seeing in the slide here, outside of analog, all of the other stuff I have sort of kind of pushed in and slowly integrated over the course of the last 6 years. And I find that it has done a really great job of adding a huge benefit to the event. You know, Roadrunners has been very appreciative of it. They've seen the benefit of what, you know, comes out of it. We're making great strides, especially with the mesh. We're doing a few more things that we've kind of got in the wings that we're working on. We hope to possibly be, in the next couple of years, doing a mesh feed of the entire finish area so that they can see what's going on within the finish area. That's something else that might be coming up the pike as far as that goes. So a lot of moving wheels here, and a lot of different technology and different types of things that we want to be able to provide New York Roadrunners with, and make this an interesting event, and not, you know, somebody show up with your analog radio and go, okay, I'm here to play radio, you know, and it's just, you know, the same old, same old. This keeps people's attention. This keeps things going, and we find new ways to provide a service so that we're not just a redundancy. One of the nice things that I will mention, and I said this multiple times already, is as far as the DMR goes, one of the things that I make it very, very known, I do not expect you, okay, because let me make this clear. This is fun. This is supposed to be enjoyable. This is not supposed to be a very hard-working task. So I don't expect you to be so fluent that I want you to write your own code plug. It's not what I require. So we, or I should say my guru that I have, because I call him my DMR guru. I have somebody that works alongside of me, and he writes the code plugs. He'll write about 5, 6, or 7 of them, dependent on that particular radio. And if you're not able to put the code plug in yourself, we provide you the code plug for you. It's kind of a 2-part for why we do that. A, it's the same code plug. There's no room for error. Everybody gets the same code plug, and at least we know the code plug works. And if it doesn't work, it's on us. It's not on you. 2, I don't want to make this a job. I don't want to make this difficult. So if you want to participate and you're like, you know what, I do want to try DMR. And you know what, I did happen to get a radio a couple months back. So you know what, I think I'll try it. Well, by doing what we're doing, where we give you the code plug, it's making your life a lot easier. So that's another thing to know, that you don't have to be responsible for getting the code plug. Just ask us for it. Look at this. The computer wants me to do a restart. No. Okay, so this is typically what the RCC somewhat looks like. So this particular set of photos that you are seeing, this was the first year after New York Roadrunners went and moved us. As I mentioned earlier, they moved us out of a trailer. Now I will say this, I was not happy, because everybody knows a trailer can have, you know, nice heat, you know, this, that, and the other. You don't feel the elements as much as being in a tent. So after decades and decades of being in a metal trailer, and not to mention a metal trailer, metal roof, good for antennas, we all know that. Going from a trailer to a tent, we had to make adjustments, both mentally and whatever. So the center picture that you're seeing here is the tent. The first year when we got moved from the bridle path to being next to the RCC. So as you can tell, a rather long tent. As the last 5 years or so have gone on, we've made adjustments for New York Roadrunners, and now our tent is very large. They give us a 20 by 20 tent, which is a very nice size. There are at least 25 people that occupy the tent. It's a very large command station that we have. So it's not like your typical, local event where, like, for example, the Aries trailer. The Aries trailer is a small enclosed, trailer, and it can only house, 4, 5, 6 people. To run the RCC at the marathon, I've got at least 20 people in there. And everything from my techs to my net control operators to my head person to myself. So it's not just a handful of people. You're talking anywhere 15, 16, 18, 20. And so this was a learning curve this year with this tent. They thought they were doing us a favor, and we said, no, they're too tight. We're on top of each other. We need a bigger tent. So this is pretty much what it looks like. Now you can tell in the picture that's on the right, with everybody that's in there, you've got log north, log south, you've got medical, you've got dropout. These are the nets that are running. So log north, log south, finish, medical, start, VIP, dropout. Those are, and by the way, every net that's being run has 2 operators. You have the person that's running the net and then a scribe. And then they take turns, or if somebody's got to at least get up to go to the bathroom, or if somebody wants to take a break, there's always 2 operators on every net. So I'm going to stop here for a minute. I want to know if anybody has any questions, or I can keep going. No, yes, no, okay, so that's a no. So this is the typical course for the marathon. Obviously, we all know a marathon is 26.2 miles. It starts in Staten Island, runs through Brooklyn, then goes to Queens, then goes into Manhattan for a little while, is in the Bronx very shortly, and then goes right back into Manhattan. And they really have not made any adjustments to this course. History for the half marathon, they changed the half marathon several years back, and now the half marathon, it starts in Brooklyn, goes through Times Square, and ends in Central Park. And the half marathon was completely different prior to that. But this is your typical, run-of-the-mill, what the course has always been since it became a 5-borough event. So how did we wind up getting here? So obviously you all know that Steve Mendelson was the one that pioneered this and started this. It was back in 1970 that the marathon was organized by Fred LeBeau. Steve Mendelson, who was WH2DHF at the time, he was the communications director all the way up until his passing, unfortunately, in 2012. And prior to this becoming a 5-borough event, for the first several years, we were not a part of this equation. Once it became a 5-borough event in 1976, that was when ham radio was put into place. And we have been a part of this event ever since. In 1994, Alan Steinfeld, who succeeded Fred LeBeau, he passed away. And ironically, 2 years earlier, Fred, before he died, he finished the marathon in just over 5 hours. So there's a lot of key people here that are a part of the history of the New York City Marathon. Steve Mendelson, as I said, he was a pioneer. He started this. He was very good friends with Fred LeBeau, and they believed that, you know, that ham radio had a place in this event, that this was such an event that would have the impact and need for the communications and the network of this type of community power. I mean, we can't make this work unless we're in numbers. If we're, you know, we want to be a force that we provide all of these different agencies with, and we can't do this if we don't have the numbers for it. I'm so happy and proud to say that as many people come out every year that do, because I know what a challenge it is to recruit for these things. You know, I mean, we alone at the local level sometimes have a hard time recruiting, and it is not an easy thing to do. You know, especially now with COVID, and COVID, you know, COVID has put quite a strain on public service and quite a strain on the public coming out at all. It saddens me a little bit, to be honest, that we're in this predicament, in this pandemic, because it it it's taken away the fact that we can be together. This alone, the fact that I'm doing this via Zoom, I mean, I personally don't like it. I miss everybody. I miss seeing actual people. And so it can be a challenge at times. And so the fact that people are still interested in coming out, people are still interested in wanting to be a part of this, and the fact that we can still try to do it safely, that makes me very happy. I know I lost a lot of people in 2021 to come out for the event because of the concerns and the fears for COVID. And I hope that things get better. I mean, things are not looking good right now, because now we're dealing with the Omicron variant. Nobody knows where this is going to go. So I know what it's like to have a recruitment problem, because I know I boast and I say, oh, you know, I got 300 people that come out, but it's not easy to get the 300 to begin with. It can be a challenge. So I'm getting off on a tangent, but recruiting can be difficult. And, you know, Steve Mendelson did a fantastic job reaching out and getting out to people. And I try to do the best I can to try to do the same. And we have Steve Mendelson to thank for a lot of stuff. He was a great guy. So here, just a little thing here. It's you can see Steve in the background with his headset and his orange hat there. That's Fred LeBeau in the photo, greeting one of the champions, Greta White's, at the finish line. So just a little history there on that photo there. Okay, so how did we wind up getting here? So 2012 was the first, hands down, first event of the marathon that got canceled. We all know why. That was Superstorm Sandy. That was the very first time ever that the marathon had been canceled. We thought it would ever be only the one. Turns out we were all wrong. But 2012 was the first time it got canceled. Steve Mendelson, who was the person in charge of this, W2ML, he happened to pass away earlier that year. There's a running joke, those close to Steve that know, he would always joke about how, well, the marathon's never going to happen if I'm not here. Well, and of course I'm getting chills. I tell the story, I get chills all the time. He died in May of 2012, and then they canceled the marathon the same year for Superstorm Sandy. So I guess he knew that if he was never around, there'd be no marathon. So that was the first year that there was no marathon. Coming back in 2013, that particular year was the first year that New York Roadrunners had over 50,000 runners. That was the first year that it tipped the scale on 50,000. In 2018, they were up to over 52,000. In 2019, they were up over 53,000. And it was reported that in 2020, they were allowing for 55,000 or more because of COVID, and then allowing the race to actually participate. They cut the athletic field and only 35,000 runners were allowed. And then I only know the number because now the event is over. It turns out that actually last year in November, there really were only about 20,000 runners that actually participated in the event. A lot of people dropped out. They changed some of the requirements within a month before, which changed how things were going to happen. So they were allowing for 35,000, but just short or just over 20,000 was what actually participated. So this is a slide that I did for last year, and this will just give you an idea of what's happening for events nowadays. Many of you already know, especially for the local events, but for 2021, this is what was new. So it was obviously the first marathon since 2019, which then now became the second time in history that the event was canceled. What was different last year? The start was completely different. The start wound up getting spread out. The start, the times were completely different. They also created more groups so that it was even more spread out. So typically what happens is that the men and the women, well, let me rephrase this. Typically the women go, and then typically the men are completely sort of within another group. And this past year, it was a women's start completely, a men's start completely, the regular pack that was broken up into even more groups. So, and what did that wind up doing actually? So everybody was used to the last athlete stepping off at like 11 something. And last year, the last group of athletes didn't step off until noon. So it was like, it stretched the entire morning out. The only good thing is that because they cut the field and there were so many less athletes, it did not affect the back end as much, because the first thing in my thought process was, okay, well, great. So now you've extended the start, you've stretched out the times. So that means, I guess we should add 2 hours to the back end. So, okay, we're not going to go home until 10 o'clock at night. And that wasn't the case. It was just, they did what they needed to do and at the start line. And because it was way more than half of what normally runs, it was fine. But by making the changes at the start, it allowed for a safer event. It had everybody spread out. They required everybody, whether you were an athlete, a volunteer, a staff member, an agency member, you had to have a mask on at the start. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then once the athletes stepped off to run, they were permitted to take their masks off. So that was, obviously, that was a new thing with masks. The course footprint did not change. The course remained the same. There were no changes. Obviously, as I said, the athletic field got completely cut, but the after numbers presented that we had just over 20,000. And then obviously there were COVID protocols that had to be put in place. There were different protocols for medical staff. There were different protocols for the volunteers themselves, especially the ones that were out on the course, because they were out in the open air. There were different types of things. As the event got closer, they were putting more changes. So one of the things that I had to deal with was I was on weekly calls with New York Roadrunners going over changes that were constantly being made because they were either being implemented by the CDC or they were being implemented by the city of New York. So all of that had to happen. I learned something for the first time last year, which was I did not realize that the New York City Marathon falls into 3 jurisdictions: local, state, and federal. And the reason for that is the entire course, the course itself, all of Manhattan, that's considered local. The Javits Center, that is state level, that's the state level. And then if you're standing at the start on Staten Island, it's federal. So there were multiple levels of protocol, that this didn't match this and this didn't match this because this federal mandate doesn't, they don't require this here. It was a mess last year. So I'm hoping that this coming year is a lot better. Hopefully things will go more smoother when it comes to putting protocols in place, and hopefully the world will have their act together. I pray. But it was a challenging year last year because of COVID. But I do have to say, everybody stepped up, everybody did their job, everybody was fantastic. Nobody complained. And I have to say that I'm proud of that, because everybody was coming out for a reason. Everybody came out because they wanted to get back into doing what they love. And despite all of this that we were up against, we came out, we did our job, and it was a successful event. And that was fantastic alone. So the typical course operator is just the usual, on a mile, anywhere between mile 3 and mile 25. That's your usual course operator. And typically it's get on post by 8 and you're done by 4. That's the usual. As I said before, it's the usual. We're on a 70 centimeter ham band on analog. With the exception of that, now we've done a few DMR optionals here and there. And as I said, it's worked really well. One of the biggest things, though, that we always try to promote is make sure you bring a headset. You have to bring a headset because, as we all know, for the people that are out on the course, it can get really noisy because there's community bands, there's community groups that come out to cheer on the runners. So one of the things that provides an issue when it comes to hearing is the noise level, and it can be a bit much. So I always try to remind people, bring a headset. Don't bring the earbuds; it's not going to help. One of the things for a typical course operator also is they get a uniform, they get a credential, and they get the all typical orange hat. One of the nice things that I like to tell people, and this was not prompted by anybody but New York Roadrunners, which was very, very nice, very respectful, very generous. When Steve died, when he passed away, New York Roadrunners continued to give us the orange hats, but they put his name on the side of the hat. And so every year now, since his passing, as a volunteer, when you get your uniform from me, it's an orange hat, says New York City Marathon. Sometimes it has the actual year on it, sometimes it doesn't. But every year on the side, it says Steve in a circle logo. And that's a really great homage for New York Roadrunners to do. It shows how much he was valued, and it continues to show how much they do value us. Contrary to popular belief, and I know I get this from a lot of people, but contrary to popular belief, and I believe that the different thoughts in people's head, I think, are stemming from the fact that people just don't know enough about us. They don't know enough about ham radio. And so when somebody says, I had a bad experience at a mile point, or I had a bad experience at the event, and it might be because you got into an argument or into a conversation with somebody, and they're like, well, why are you here? But they don't understand what ham radio is. They don't understand our purpose. And at the end of the day, we're there to make everybody feel safe, because if something happens, as we all know, And I don't like to talk about things that went wrong or things that went bad, but we all know what happened at the Boston Marathon. Okay. And we all know what happened with 9/11. And we all know what happened with all of that stuff and how bad it happened to go with communications. And at the end of the day, we are providing a service that is invaluable because nobody else can. You can't operate on a handband without a license. Okay. And you can't operate a radio if our commercial repeater doesn't work. And that's why we're there. And Steve and Fred LeBeau did something incredible by implementing ham radio into this event. And this event has so many parts and so many wheels and so many, it's just a massive event. And the planning that goes into it starts the day after. It literally starts the next day after the event ends. So I'm so happy that New York Roadrunners put Steve's name on the hat, because you know what? It goes to show that they do have such a great respect for us. One of the things that a lot of people don't know, and when I tell them, they're like, oh, no. And I'm like, no, go ahead, go look it up. The reason that the hat is orange, and no, it's not because all of our hats are this bright safety orange color. That's not the reason. Yes, it's bright. Yes, we're the only group that wears the orange. But what people don't know is that in the runner's guidebook, okay, in the guidebook that every single runner is handed, in the back of the book, it tells them in actual wording, if you need to drop out, look for the ham radio operator. It says it black and white. Look for the ham radio operator in the orange hat. It says it clear as day. I see you laughing, Lou. It says it clear as day in the book. Look for the ham radio operator. So that's another reason why we get the same hat every year, why it's bright orange. There's a couple of other groups that are out there that do have some hats that are issued to them that are not that color. But that's why it's always been the same color every year. That's why it's always been an orange hat, because it's in writing. And they know that if they need to drop out, they will be able to do so by locating one of us with an orange hat. So that's another reason why I tell people, you've got to wear the hat. They're looking for us. So that's another little tidbit, because nobody realizes that it's actually in writing. And I looked it up one year and I was pleasantly surprised. So it's another little tiny tidbit. So again, this is just typical. It's across the board. We still do it like every other event. We use tactical and formal net procedures. We don't do anything off the ordinary. We don't do anything, everything is the way you're trained to as a ham radio operator. It's tactical and it's a formal net. You cannot be on the net unless you're asked permission or spoken to. And then the only thing that isn't is what's happening on the course, where the mile captain gets to choose a frequency, a simplex frequency of their choice based on what they know or what works for them. And then that is an informal, okay, and that's between the mile operator and the mile captain. And again, this is standard practice. As I said before, we're doing APRS, we're doing the sweep vehicles, and then this is what I was going to add as well, because I mentioned there was a little piece earlier. As of 2018, we now, this is another thing that we provide. For those of you that are unaware, in 2017, so I correct myself, it started in 17. In 2017, New York Roadrunners hired a new safety officer. That safety officer is a retired NYPD that was with the Counterterrorism Task Force. Probably one of the smartest things they could have done. As such, and he is, I want to add, he is very big on ham radio, which is another added bonus, because over the course of the years that I have been involved with this, that I have had to be the person in charge, going year to year to year, being handed another New York Roadrunner person, and then not clear on what ham radio is or what it does or how we are or how we can help is a challenge. And the fact that this gentleman knew exactly what we do, knew exactly what ham radio was a bonus. So with his background in 2017, we were added to these two positions, critical intersections and jumbotron. And so what that means is on the course, okay, and these are course assignments, by the way, on the course, there are critical intersections that are being utilized by EMS, FD, and PD. And these particular critical intersections are what are being utilized should something go wrong, whether an athlete needs to be transported or non-event related, meaning there's a fire over there and now the firehouse that's on the other side of the course needs to get their truck out and over. All of these people need to use those particular intersections so as to not interrupt the race. So what we have been tasked to do is, as I make assignments, okay, and let me explain how this works. So I have a mile captain and I have X amount of people. You have a mile captain and let's say 5 people to that mile captain. If I feel that 5 is not enough for him because now his mile has a critical intersection involved, because what will happen here is you have a mile captain and you have your operators. The mile captains are responsible for the following. They are responsible for the mile. They are responsible for a medical tent. And now they may also be asked to man or staff a critical intersection. In fact, I have several miles that have more than one intersection. So I have to make sure that there are enough operators for that particular mile. And what's happening is we are keeping an operator at critical intersections in addition to just roaming the mile or at a medical tent. And what's happening is if something big is going to happen, they're utilized for that. Or if something is happening and they need to tell us, hey, listen, a fire alarm just went off. We're being told PD is going to open this up. We let them know that there's going to be EMS or whatever making a transport across the mile or across the course. We let our CC know, the Race Command Center, we let them know that that's happening so that they have an idea, because otherwise they have no idea other than just NYPD talking internally. So now we are at critical intersections as well. And then another thing that happened was there's always been jumbotrons across the course, but they were simply there as just pure entertainment. That was their purpose. They were there. They would throw up what was on ABC, NBC, whatever network was covering, okay? And the jumbotron would just have the feed. Now what happens is the jumbotron operators, and I'm talking, I don't want anybody to get confused here. When I say a jumbotron operator, I'm referring to the physical operator that came with the jumbotron, the man that drove it there, the man that turns it on. That jumbotron operator by his company is given 4 canned messages. Those canned messages are pre-done, predetermined, pre-printed, pre-typed up, whatever you want to call it. And they're sitting there waiting to be utilized. The gentleman that is now the new security officer with New York Roadrunners was smart and said, well, how long is it going to take for me to pick up the phone and call 5 people and tell them all that I need the jumbotron message to go to message 4? Well, we all know how long that's going to take, right? You got to pick up the phone, you got to dial, you got to wait for the phone to ring, you got to hope he answers. No, I have 4 to 5 operators, hams, that get assigned to the jumbotron driver or the operator, whatever you want to title him. Is it a boring assignment? A little bit, but all I got to do is pick up the radio and call all my Jumbotron operators in one fell swoop and tell that ham, you got to get that Jumbotron changed to message 3 and you need to do it now. Because the message is either going to be weather related, it's going to be event related, or it could be problem related. You know, it could be whatever. We're shutting the event down. There's something wrong, or there's a massive storm coming, and we got to tell everybody to get off. Whatever. It could be whatever the message is, but we do it in one fell swoop, like that, and it's done and it's over, and we're not waiting for each Jumbotron operator to pick up the phone. So this is another thing that we're providing New York Roadrunners to help make it a smooth event. Everybody asks me from time to time, how did this happen? I don't know how this happened. Other than I will tell you this, I was handed the keys to this event. Unbeknownst to me, I had no idea that if I started sending 600 emails for recruiting out of my Yahoo account, Yahoo would lock me out, which is exactly what happened. This is a true story. I did my first year of recruiting. I sent 600 emails out from a database I was handed, and Yahoo shut me down for 4 days. So I said, now what do I do? So I said, I need my personal account. So I created event hams at Gmail. That blew up into a Facebook page, which blew up into a website. And that's how Event Hams was born. I'm not a club. I'm not an organization. It's me trying to keep things centralized and easy to remember. It's Event Hams. It's a catchy term. It's a catchy name. And that's pretty much how it came to be. There is a website. I try to update it as frequently as I can. I utilize it during the event because it's a lot easier to put documents up there days before, rather than trying to go in and email 300 people and hope that they get it. So I tell my volunteers, make it your business, check the website constantly. Everything that's going to get updated is going to be updated. It'll be there with a time date stamp, so you'll know when the last time was that you got it. And that's pretty much it. So I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for having me. I hope that I gave you guys enough information, and if you have questions, let me know.
Do I get fired?
No, Carl, you cannot get fired.
If I get a felony conviction, that'll bar me, right? I can't do this anymore. If I get a felony conviction, I get fired.
No, Carl, this is a Carl thing, everybody. He's been trying to get fired for a while. You're not getting fired, Carl.
But a felony conviction, wouldn't that disqualify me because I'm a felon now?
Carl, you know I have way too many friends in the police department for that to happen, so you can't get fired.
Plus, they'll just have you use a cell phone, Carl.
Oh. I mean, well, how about if I, molest a sheep in the sheep meadow and I bring that over from New Jersey? That's crossing state lines, so that would be, I could get a felony conviction for those nasty things.
No, Carl.
I can't win, can I?
No.
All right.
Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? Anything that I didn't mention, or maybe I touched on something that was interesting?
How about workman's comp? I haven't had exactly good luck lately.
Glenn, I'll put you somewhere that's safe, I promise.
Deb, do you have any additional new technology that you plan to integrate into the next couple of years marathons?
We are working on more stuff. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, right now, what was being done with Mesh was that we were just doing it about at halfway point. Oh, thanks, John. We were just doing it at mile 14.5. For those of you that don't know anything about the course, 14.5 is such a difficult spot. It's literally a 90-degree mark. if the run, and the other problem with 14.5 is that if the runner's not paying attention where they are, it is very easy for them to go off course.
That's-
Because there's an entrance near the bridge. So we keep an eye on 14.5, not only because of that problem and because of its 90-degree angle. We started providing mesh there for safety issues. But we're branching out and we want to start doing it in Central Park. The problem with Central Park is you need a lot of permits. You don't need permits per se, really on the course. You can kind of get away with things by having a vehicle that provides the mesh. We're a little bit more flexible because the mesh is on our equipment, our vehicles. With Central Park, it's a little bit different. What we are attempting to do, or we were going to do actually in 2020 and 2021, was for those of you familiar with the finish line, well, post-finish. For those of you familiar with post-finish, after the runner crosses the finish line, they go through Central Park and then they exit. Well, family reunion used to be along Central Park West. Because of COVID, family reunion disappeared last year, and so did inside Central Park. It was the first year ever in the history of the New York City Marathon that when the runner crossed the finish line, the minute they crossed the finish line, they were out of the park. New York Roadrunners wanted you out of the park. Like, you stepped over, you're gone. Where normally it would be over the finish line, go to post finish, get your medal, get your bag, get your Mylar blanket, and now you're going to walk, because now you're going to go find that UPS truck with your runner bag. Well, that was non-existent. There was nobody in Central Park. So I actually wound up last year I wound up cutting assignments because I had no assignments to give, because everything that was normally an assignment post-finish was non-existent because of COVID. So we had plans of putting mesh and putting up video and all of that in the family reunion area to monitor Central Park West, and that didn't happen because all of the changes that were made. So we're hoping to get back to that. We're hoping to be able to put some mesh up at the finish line. The only thing that we did do was that, in addition to, like I said, 14.5, we added last year that we sent a mesh feed to 1PP, and for the last 2 years, so 2019 and 2021, we had a running feed within our tent. So we had a running feed so that we did the running feed in 19, but we didn't feed it until last year. So the nice thing was that last year, 1PP could see the course and they could see our tent and what was going on, and had a really good idea of, you know, if there was a lot of activity, whatever, all of that. And we're also hoping to possibly, what's the word I want to use? We want to perfect the situation with Slack. Slack is a public platform. We're looking to do something that would be non-proprietary, so that, you know, information is kept a little bit more closer to the vest, so to speak. But we are constantly, I have a phenomenal team. You know, I call them my tech team. Those are the people that are highly involved with every step that I make when it comes to the mesh and the DMR. So the technical team, they're constantly coming up with new ways of how we can utilize the newest and greatest of what ham radio has to offer. So we're constantly making changes. And I would probably say definitely in the next couple of years, there's going to be more. I know one of the things that we do want to work on a little bit more, it's always just kind of been there and hanging in the wind, and every year we say we're going to work on it more and we don't, is a lot of mapping. Being able to do, you know, and that's in conjunction with APRS, but we want to do a lot of mapping, and put that more into play with the APRS, because right now the only part of APRS that we're utilizing is oh, and I think what I did, it was on the screen, but I didn't mention it. One of the things is that I have a guy that one of my hams, he built the trackers. The first 2 years, the trackers were enormous. And of course, as you can imagine, trying to trek them from the bus to the start to the vehicles, they're heavy. Now they're in these very small Pelican cases, very small, very light. But the trackers, so when I mentioned earlier that the APRS is in the vehicles, the vehicle APRS, they're not being run by everyone's individual phones. The APRS app is only being utilized for anybody that that's on the course. We're giving people the ability to participate by having your APRS on. If you're in a vehicle, you have a physical tracker that goes with you. So I'm in a vehicle that goes down the course. So, and Lou is shaking his head. Lou and Alice are in the lead vehicles. They are given trackers and they go into the vehicle, they get set up, the antenna goes on the roof, everything gets plugged in, everything's got, a cigarette lighter for power. It's a fantastic way it was built. They did it. Dave, who did the build on them, did a fantastic job. Everything is, if you've never operated or known how to set it up or put it together, he made it idiot proof, and he did a fantastic job. And he made it lighter every year. He fixed it so that it wasn't so damn heavy to carry. Because remember, Lou, the first year the thing was so heavy. I think we were about done. We got about halfway to, and we still had another 2 miles to walk, and we were like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? This is heavy. So it's very light, very compact, very easy to use. But the vehicles utilize trackers, so we don't have any issues sending the signal. As we all know, sometimes the cell phones might not be reliable. So we have the APRS, and that's the extent right now of APRS, where we're just using, we're tracking it, we're tracking those vehicles on a map. We want to take that another step further and use mapping, and take that another step further and figure out how else we can utilize that, in addition to helping the mile captains and the mile operators understand their mile location a little better. There's a lot of moving parts, I said, and especially when we get new volunteers, in and they've never done this event before, for them to be able to go to a link and see the mapping that we've done and see, where we've placed a pin, and show them the parts of the course on a mapping server. That we want to do that as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I have a question, and it's probably not a ham radio question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Sure.
And the question is, do the participants, the runners in this race, are they equipped with any kind of technology so that they can be tracked individually? And I'm thinking of something along the lines of RFID, or maybe something more sophisticated. I don't know. I'm asking the question.
Nope, that's a fantastic question. The answer to that is yes. So that's that particular, to answer that question, that has evolved over the years. Way back when it was the runners would get their packets and then they would put a chip on their shoe. And one of the things that used to slow down the post-finish area was that the runner would have to cross the finish, they would get their medal, and then they would walk up to this area and put their shoe up on, a platform. And a volunteer would sit there and take or clip or break off the clip from the runner's shoe. And that has since changed. And now it's sort of in their bib. It's part of their bib that they wear. So kind of like what you're saying, like an RFID, it's in the bib. Not to mention also when they cross the start line, their timer starts, and then when they cross the finish, but you can't track. Well, no, I take that back. Yes, they are tracked because you can. So I want to say 3-4 years ago, well, we skipped a year. So 3 or 4 years ago, there's now where like friends and family can go on the New York Roadrunner app and you can plug in the runner number and it'll tell you how far along the course the runner is. That's all because of what's in their bib. There's like a barcode and everything, and it's all inside the bib. The bib is like, it's like, you know, a thin piece of paper, but there is something part of the bib that is tracking them.
Okay, is there any interoperability between the equipment that the ham radio operators use and the runner's bib equipment that identifies who they are?
No, none. The system, New York Roadrunner system, their system, we don't have any, we have no way to access it or play with it. There's no way. The bottom line answer to that is no. You know, we supplement their system with information, but we're not connected in any way. No, I don't even know that I would want to be.
Yeah, I could see that becoming a security concern, but
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there was such a thing. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, you know, along the lines of HIPAA too, I mean, there are protocols that are in place on my end with what can and can't be shared over the radio on the air during the course of the event. If it is major critical, then, you know, we pick up the phone and we use a cell phone to talk about certain information because HIPAA is involved. We can give the runner number, even though the runner number is public and you can look it up online on the website. Our responsibility ends there. As long as we're not physically saying the name of the runner and what it is that's wrong, that's why we're using disposition codes, we're safe. So, you know, our responsibility, you know, we're careful and we're covered. We give only the necessary information, but it's standard protocol with any event, you know, as all of you know, when we do the local events, you know, you keep it short, simple, and you only give what you need.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? Okay. None heard. Thank you very much. Extremely interesting presentation. Speaking for myself, I was a friend of Steve Mendelson way back when he lived on Camp Avenue in Amityville.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, I was one of the people that helped him move from 6 Camp Avenue to Flushing
Oh,
way
God.
back when. And I recall lugging a pair of very heavy teletype machines for him. And then up to an apartment in Flushing, which was not a pleasant job, but it was very interesting. But thank you very much. I mean, this is something new. I have not experienced nor volunteered for these things. And, you know, I found it very interesting. I'm sure the rest of us did. So a big
George,
kudos
you
to
don't know
Thank you.
what you're missing.
I hope that I wasn't too boring. I hope I was as informative as I was hoping to be. You know, as I said, I dialed it down a lot because normally the presentation also has a lot of recruiting information in it. But based on what Harry and George and Richie, what you guys were looking for, I hope I did what I could to answer questions. You know, as I said, a lot has evolved over the course of the last 7-8 years, especially since I took over. Like I mentioned, I want to keep it interesting. I don't, you know, if all we do is analog, you know, we're just gonna fall into, you know, oh, all right, well, this is just the norm, and you know, this is what I'm used to, and I'm just trying to keep it interesting and keep everyone interested in the hobby, and the hobby itself keeps evolving, and you know, where else can we do what the hobby allows us to do than to do it in real life and do it in a public service event that can benefit from it. So that is one of the reasons why I started implementing everything. And I hope I was able to cover that here. I know I got off the topic here and there. I tend to do that. I apologize. I think of something and then something else comes up in my head and I think of something else. So, but I hope I answered questions. I hope I gave you guys enough insight. I'm sorry that we're not in person. I feel like it would have been better if we were in front of each other, but I guess with the COVID protocols and everything, this is kind of where we're at the moment. But I told Richie, I mentioned to George and Harry, I'm happy to come in, in the spring, and go over more things and whatever, and see you guys, and maybe it'll be better and we'll be able to be in person. So, but I thank you all very much for having me. I wish every one of you a very happy and healthy new year. And hopefully this coming year will be much better. One can only hope, I think. So